When my mother Googled gun shops New Orleans, it came up a map with an arrow that said start. She was really just one button away, and it was that easy. You know, she just got up out of her house and drove to the gun store, and we really had no time to protect her, and she didn't have time to protect herself.
She evidently walked right through here, walked past the labyrinth, walked here, walked here, walked here, and that's where she ended up. I've kind of made a little grotto, a little altar. I think it's just being at the last place she was. What did she think when she was sitting there? She's sitting there with a brand new .38 caliber pistol, revolver. What do you think at a moment like that?
In the experiences that we had with my mother earlier in her life, when she tried to commit suicide, it was all very impulsive. It was almost like an attack, like a panic attack that was so strong that this was the only thing that her brain could think to end it. My mom texted me a couple weeks before she died and asked her how she was doing, and she said she was in the fight for her life.
You know, my friend Katrina called me and said my mom killed herself yesterday. She was looking for justice in all of these ways, and I had to be the one to say we actually don't have anything that could have protected her. The crushing defeat is really difficult, and a lot of times that's the end of the conversation. But Katrina said, okay, well, let's fix that.
The bill is Donna's Law, named after my mother. In all the time with her mental illness, there was so much shame and silence and confidentiality, and I felt like in the weeks leading up to her death was the first time that she really became public about the suffering that she was having. She would be very proud to be able to use her life in this way.
We have Donna's Law. And technically what it is that a person has the opportunity to put themselves on a do not buy list. So what that means is if I'm having some sort of mental breakdown or I'm not feeling quite stable, I can register myself voluntarily to say, gun providers, do not sell me a firearm. Once I'm on that list and I go to X store, you run my name, I will pop up and say, do not sell Jimmy Harris a firearm.
So much of suicide is impulsive, and it's sort of people formulate a suicide plan. I have myself formulated a suicide plan, and you have one idea, and it's, I'm gonna jump out this window. The window is locked, the paint is stuck, you're like, oh well, you know? And seriously, that's all it takes to save a life. And you know, if your plan is to go to Dick's and buy a gun, and you remember you can't do that, or you get there and they say no, chances are you live.
If you decide to take yourself off of that list, which you absolutely can at any time, there's just a short waiting period because data shows us the suicide ideation turned into suicide planning, turned into suicide completion is a really rapid process.
Before this happened in my family, I always had the feeling like we weren't a good family because this was happening. And after she died, I realized that we were a good family, and this happens to good families. Every year for the first day of Carnival, she would text me and she would just write the words, "dut, dut, dut," you know? And I would write back, ma, 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 like, you're in, we're doing Carnival together, Mama will be there. My mother really loved driving the pickup truck and the parade, and eventually she would just get out and start dancing, and sometimes I'd be like, where's she going from that truck? And then I'd see her kind of like scurry off, and then shake her tutu around until she was tired. I think that people make the effort to create legislation because their hearts are broken.
I think she's fearless. And I think so much of suicide is kind of swept under the rug. And what Katrina has done is put herself out there and talked about it and said, I'm not ashamed of my mother or her mental illness. I blame the gun, and I think we can do something about the gun. The idea is not kind of traditional gun control, actually has a chance to be bipartisan because it's people kind of helping themselves as opposed to the government saying, no, no, you can't have a gun.
We have an opportunity with this particular legislation to be on the forefront of something. State of Louisiana, we always last in everything. Let us be one of the leading states in dealing with mental health and firearms. I'm optimistic that my colleagues will understand this is not about Democrat, it's not about Republican, this is about saving people's lives.
I mean, why it means so much to me personally, the simplest answer is I don't want to die. And I actually think signing up to put my name on this list would reduce the probability of me dying by suicide. What really was the tipping point for me was that I surveyed 200 people receiving psychiatric care. So people like me, you know, with bipolar and depression and so forth, and asked them point blank, would you sign up for the proposal? 46% said yes. And that's when it wasn't about me anymore. That was like, oh my gosh, a lot of people are like me. A lot of people would want to sign up.
We've heard from survivors all over the state saying this would have worked, this could have worked, or the ones that really motivate me are the people that write in begging, pleading to sign up.
My mother would have signed this bill first when we were children because she wouldn't have wanted to do this to her children. And more recently, I know she would have signed to protect herself and us from this because she signed everything else to protect herself. She would have signed this one too.